I know that he'd be delighted to hear his songs on the airwaves. So it's quite a sad moment for us, really.
Yeah. What about you, Dorothy?
Yeah, it's nice to hear his song on the radio. I know he'd be very pleased himself.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's what you sent us is a booklet which includes the CD, and it's a very well put together booklet. And I think the great thing about it is for those, like we say, myself, who wouldn't have known Tom, by reading it and by listening to some of the CD, you get a sense of the person, which I suppose is what you were trying to achieve, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose we want to capture the essence of him, really. Like he was working in IT, but clearly his big love in life was his music, and he was a very fun-loving guy, you know.
Yeah.
So people that met him were touched by him and influenced by him, and I think we tried to capture some of that in the photo book. And you know, he had friends all over the world, from America to Asia and all parts in between. So it was nice to have that tangible, if you like, to send out to people and really get him, if you like, or get the essence of him.
And how many of them did you send out, Brendan?
We got 400 done initially, and we had to get another 100 done. So we're down to the last 50 or so at this stage, you know.
Right.
And we just had requests from people that you know were related to the friends of his, and for extra copies, and we just sent them out, you know.
And Brendan, take us back to that fateful day last June. How did you first learn about Tom's death?
Yeah, it was awful, really. It was a missed phone call on my mobile about 5:45 in the morning, and I picked it up and saw a number, rang it, and I got on to a guy I knew out there in the Department of Foreign Affairs.
This is in Singapore.
In Singapore, yeah, Micheál Smith, who just broke the bad news. And Micheál actually, funnily, had been with Tom that night when they were out together, and they were singing in a pub, you know, celebrating the return of some friends to Australia. And it was just devastating. I mean, I thought the world had ended, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't even speak, actually, to Dorothy, who was next to me, and I handed the phone over to her. I just felt that the whole world had stopped, you know.
How long had he been in Singapore, Brendan?
He was there about 14, 15 months at that stage, and he was due to stay for another year, so he'd been home this time now, around March, April this year, you know.
Yeah, and Dorothy, when Brendan passed the phone to you, you obviously continued to talk to Micheál.
Yes, he passed the phone to me, and obviously I knew there was some terrible disaster had happened, but so I asked Micheál to repeat the story to me, and then he told me what had happened.
And did you feel in a way helpless because of the fact that this was happening thousands of miles away?
Absolutely, yeah. It felt, you know, the instinct was, well, if we could get there, we could, you know, sort it out. Obviously you can't, but that's the way your mind thinks at a moment like that.
And there was disbelief as well. I mean, I didn't believe it initially. I said they made a mistake. It couldn't be our Tom, like healthy, fit Tom. That we were with him that Monday, actually, in Singapore, and I spoke to him that Friday lunchtime here, which had been tea time, his time, and you know, everything was, you know, tickety-boo. There was no hint of any impending disaster, you know. So that's what made it even more incredulous.
Yeah. And what appears to have happened, Brendan?
Yeah, it's a thing called myocarditis. I never heard of it before until this event. It stopped his heart from beating. It appears like it interrupted the electrical circuits, a viral infection of the heart muscle, and he suffered a cardiac arrest and died. And that was kind of it, served up on a plate, and we had no say, or we're totally powerless to do anything about it, you know.
Yeah, and presumably then you travelled over to Singapore in the days.
Well, we got a flight that afternoon, actually, that Saturday afternoon. We got a flight out of London, and we arrived in Singapore that Sunday evening, and the Irish ambassador, Richard O'Brien at the time, greeted us and took us to the Singapore casket, which is a memorial, you know, a funeral home, and there the horrible truth became evident and real for us, you know.
And Dorothy, what was it like for you?
Well, the whole thing was very unreal. It just felt as if we'd wandered into the Twilight Zone. It was, you know, I remember those days as just, you know, just drifting through it in a very unreal state of, we just didn't believe it, you know.
And tell me about Tom. Tell me about his life and times.
Well, Tom was he was always a very upbeat personality. He was always in good form. He was always, he loved people, and he was a real connector of people. He loved music, obviously. He loved writing songs, and he always had the guitar in his hand. But he was loved a good chat. He was great company. People generally found him great company.
And he was an only son.
He was an only son, our firstborn, yeah.
And his sister Dara.
His sister Dara.
Younger sister Dara, is it?
That's right, yeah. She's 4.5 years younger.
And were they very close?
They were, indeed, yeah. He used to, he was very protective of her when she was little. We used to joke that he was like a third parent,
Yeah.
He used to, and, as they grew into their teens, they became great old buddies.
Yeah. And you chose, even though this all happened in June of last year, he was due to celebrate his 30th birthday later in 2010.
In September, yeah.
Yeah. You chose to celebrate his life by having a party. Tell us about that, how difficult that was.
Yes, well, I suppose in one way, we had been so supported by family and friends. We really were just so lucky with family and friends. Our friends and Tom's friends and our own extended family were fantastic. And it kind of kept us going to be doing things like organising the party. And it was about celebrating his life, really. Because he just loved life so much, and he'd love a gang getting together like that. And he loved the music, and he loved Baltimore. We had it in the Algiers down in Baltimore, where he used to play sometimes himself. So
and it was a big musical session.
It was a big musical session, yeah.
Brothers and sisters of yours, I believe, brothers of yours were playing music at it.
That's right. Yeah, they played a lot of his songs and some of their own, and it was a lovely night. But it was very much a celebration of him.
Mm-hmm. And did you find that in the wake of it, did it help you, for instance?
Absolutely, yeah. I found that it's just having the support of the group of people around us all the time was very, very helpful.
And in putting together the memory book, Brendan, was that helpful or was it very traumatic?
Well, what I discovered when all his stuff came back, he had quite a lot of material recorded that I had never heard before. I had heard some of the tracks, but there was a lot of other stuff there, even stuff on his iPhone that were just rough cuts, and they were fresh and recent, and all the more poignant because he was gone. So it was actually, I suppose, therapeutic. It was very sad initially. I couldn't listen to them for some days, even weeks, and eventually when I started listening and started to pull them together, I began to recognise, God, this is the right way to remember him, and pull them together and put the album together. Now, they were very varying in quality, so Dorothy's brother, Pat, cleaned them up for us on his system and got them to the state they're in now, so it was great to do. It was therapeutic, actually, I found. And then when I was looking at the photographs and looking at his life, the laying out those sets of pictures, if you like, captured the kind of guy he was, and like what I remember about him especially is like he was very non-judgmental, non-critical, didn't get into kind of backbiting or talking about people, and he had no kind of critical dimension to him in that respect. And then he also was very tech savvy. I mean, the breadth of stuff he had done on software programs that he had bought and put on his PC, and all of he played all the instruments, did all the arranging, so there was a huge kind of legacy of technical skill there that I was anxious to try and capture as well. And
so you were finding, in the wake of his death, you were finding out loads more about your son and what he had achieved, not only in work, but through the pursuit of his talent as a musician.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and just so understated. I mean, that was the tragedy of it as well for me. That he even hadn't broadcasted to us, his family, and it was just so sad to see it all there. Like we have, it's 45 or 50 tracks there in various states, and
you've put 12 of the tracks, and they're all his own compositions.
All his own compositions, yeah.
On a range of themes, I presume. And do you listen to it often?
I do, actually. I play it regularly in the car, and I have it on the iPod, and it's a regular source of comfort. Sometimes it's hard to listen to it, but a lot of the time it's nice to hear his voice.
And Dorothy, what about you? What is life like without Tom?
Well, I think of him all the time. He's on my mind all the time. In a funny way, I don't know if I'd say without Tom, because I suppose I feel him around. I'm very aware of his presence. He'd never be far from my mind. He'd never be far from my heart. So.
You feel he's there helping you?
Yeah. I feel him in going forward. It's the only way I can describe it, really.
And it helps you, obviously, this sense that he is around.
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And Brendan and Dorothy, what advice would you give to other parents who find themselves faced with a similar tragedy? I know it's very fresh and it's only happened just a few months ago, but what has helped you, and what has been the most difficult thing for you?
I suppose the best thing I found was talking. I like talking to people and talking about him and hearing stories that I hadn't heard before about him, or anecdotal things that had occurred, and his friends actually were hugely supportive and helpful to us in that respect, and shared a lot of his life with us, and things we didn't know, even little kindnesses that he did, and little, like we found out, for example, he helped one of our neighbour's children one time, in an accident in town, and we never knew about that, and he never boasted about it. So there was lots of kind of revelation, and I found talking and engaging on the subject of Tom to be very therapeutic for me. Obviously you have extremely dark moments, and it helps you pull out of those when you do recollect some of those thoughts and have those conversations.
And Dorothy, do you have strong faith, by the way, Dorothy?
I do, probably not in the more traditional sense, but I certainly do, yes.
And unfortunately, as a result of this terrible, tragic event in your lives, you've become very familiar with sudden cardiac death and what it's about.
Yes.
Yeah, and we've kind of aligned with a few different groups. In true form, there's a number of different organisations out there that do support. SED Young, for example, is one that we found a lot of support from, and they're a support group primarily. And the Mater Hospital run, through the Mater Foundation, run heart screening for bereaved families. And there's another organisation called CRY. They're all centred around the whole idea of sudden cardiac death, sudden adult death, and supporting people who have experienced that,
And the memory book itself, if people were interested in finding a little bit more about your wonderful son Tom's life, they can do so, I believe, on there is a tribute page.
But he's got a Facebook page, I suppose, and there's actually links going up on the SED Young website. I don't know if they're there yet, actually, but that will pull people through to. There's a tribute on Facebook called In Loving Memory of Tom O'Regan.
That's right.
Which is a general kind of place that people write comments and stuff, yeah. And he's lots of online presence, which he only started developing in the last 6 months, funnily enough. And now they're a great comfort because there's little videos of him. He had his Songwriter's Diaries page that he wrote or put together.
And this is so important for you, is it, Brenda, to keep his memory alive? Because we had this discussion recently, and there were some people who texted in the show and said, when we were talking specifically about young babies dying on that show, but people were saying, you have to move on. For you, the sense of him being around and of him being a presence in your lives is pretty crucial. It
is, yeah, and I suppose also to recognise the person he was, that like he might have been an IT person to some people, but in the broader context, he was a friendly, upbeat, happy, kind-hearted guy with a lot of musical talent, and that's what we tried to capture. And I suppose it also helps people understand the depth of our loss, and when they see that vibrant person in those photographs and hear his music, it helps them kind of understand the depth that of the loss we feel.
Yeah, well, Brendan and Dorothy O'Regan, thanks a million for joining us this morning and sharing Tom's story with us. And it is indeed the case, because here on the show we've been just looking at the memory book, and you do get a sense of him, and he seems to have been not only a very talented person but a happy and easygoing individual.